The numbers coming out of Moscow are not just bad, they are catastrophic. Russia's economy is rotting and collapsing faster than even its own officials feared. The stock market is plummeting, the ruble is in freefall, and the last of the Kremlin's lifeline reserves are disappearing. But this is not just another currency crisis. This is the economic end of Vladimir Putin's regime, the final price to pay for 2 decades of corruption, war, and global isolation. For years, the Kremlin has maintained that sanctions would strengthen Russia, that self-reliance would shield it from Western pressure. But now that illusion has crumbled. Factories are closing, banks are tightening withdrawal restrictions, and ordinary Russians are struggling amid a storm of inflation that has left shelves bare and life savings worthless. Today, we'll analyze how Russia's financial system is collapsing from within, why even China is quietly turning its back, and what these numbers really mean for Putin's future. On October 8th, the Moscow Exchange Index lost more than 4% of its value overnight, its biggest one-day drop since 2022. In just a few hours, 1.3 trillion rubles, or roughly $160 billion, were wiped off the market. This was no ordinary decline. It was a warning shot from investors who no longer believe in Putin's fortress economy. Russia's largest state-owned companies, Gazprom, Sberbank, Rosneft, have all seen their stock values collapse by 4 to 6%. Even heavily censored state media have acknowledged the sell-off is unusual. Behind the headlines lies something far more serious, a collapse of trust. For 2 decades, Putin has convinced the Russian elite that his absolute control is a guarantee of stability. But when that so-called stability disappears, fear replaces all trust, and money flees faster than any street protest. After Moscow officially cut off the last diplomatic backchannels with Washington, investor confidence evaporated, like a final door closing on the golden age. Even in the Kremlin, officials have begun to warn that foreign exchange reserves will run out within 2 years if war spending continues at current levels. For the first time since 1998, Russia is teetering on the brink of default, and this time, there is no IMF bailout on the horizon. Look at the raw data, because the numbers tell a story that Putin cannot distort. According to Russia's Ministry of Labor, the country faces a shortage of nearly 11 million workers by 2030. Entire industries, from construction to manufacturing, are running out of manpower. To fill the gap, Moscow is importing migrant workers from Central Asia, but even that is not enough. And as the workforce disappears, Putin clings to his last card, oil and gas. But it is a disaster. Oil is no longer the golden ticket.
Drone attacks have crippled refineries across Russia, taking 13.5% of refining capacity offline. Exports through the port of Novorossiysk have fallen 18% year-on-year, costing billions of dollars in lost revenue.
Industrial output has fallen 6.8% since January 2025, while inflation is at 14%, the highest in more than 2 decades. The ruble, once kept artificially stable by strict currency controls, is now trading at just over 125 rubles to the dollar, its weakest level since the invasion began. Even Russia's once massive gold and foreign exchange reserves, once a robust $630 billion, have plummeted to $360 billion. Sanctions, war spending, and corruption have burned through nearly half of Russia's savings in less than 3 years.
Российские маркетсы bleeded, not from panic, but from cold calculation. Foreign investors are retreating step by step, closing each position with precision and purpose. Large funds in Beijing, New Delhi, and Astana, once Moscow's financial lifeline, are quietly liquidating their holdings. Even Kazakhstan's sovereign wealth fund has withdrawn billions of dollars from the Russian banking system, avoiding being caught in the Kremlin's ever-tightening web of capital controls.
Even China's support, once described as unwavering, is fading fast.
In 2023, Beijing invested more than $12 billion in Russian projects. By mid-2025, that figure was less than $2 billion, an 80% collapse. Chinese companies are no longer willing to risk secondary sanctions or delayed payments from Russian partners. Their deals are now entirely transactional and entirely on Beijing's terms. For the global financial world, Russia is no longer a high-risk opportunity. It is a black hole where money goes in and never comes out again. Behind the data and numbers lies the real tragedy, the Russian people. The $160 billion wiped from Moscow's markets is not just the money of oligarchs. It is the life savings of ordinary Russians trapped in state-run banks and faltering pension funds. For teachers, nurses, and small business owners, daily life has become a game of survival. Food costs have soared. Bread is up 42%, sugar 68%, cooking oil almost 80%, and petrol more than 55%. Real wages have fallen 11% in just 2 years, while household debt has doubled. Basic necessities are now a luxury for millions. The Kremlin insists that Western economic sabotage is to blame. But Russians know the truth. It wasn't sabotage, it was mismanagement. Across cities like St. Petersburg, Novosibirsk, and Yekaterinburg, small protests are emerging. They are quiet, symbolic, but growing. Shopkeepers complain about empty shelves. Truck drivers can't afford to fill their diesel tanks, and educated young people are leaving their homeland. Putin promised Russia prosperity and strength. Instead, he has brought isolation, poverty, and a fading future. Putin's war machine has swallowed his own economy from within. Military spending now consumes more than 40% of the federal budget, the highest proportion in modern history. More than half of all state contracts are now classified as defense-related. To finance the war, the Kremlin has slashed its social programs. Health spending has fallen by 30%. The infrastructure budget has been cut in half, and education funding has hit a record low. At the same time, Russia's national wealth fund, once valued at $180 billion, has shrunk to less than $60 billion. Economists inside Russia privately admit that at the current rate of burn, the fund could be empty by 2026. Meanwhile, the defense industry is disintegrating. Sanctions have cut off vital imports: semiconductors, machine tools, drone engines. Factories are now digging up old Soviet-era stockpiles just to keep churning out weapons. The war economy Putin boasts about is unsustainable. It is self-defeating. For years, the Kremlin has insisted that China would be Russia's savior, that the East could completely replace the West. But Beijing has now pulled out of that game. True, China now accounts for more than 40% of Russia's imports and 30% of its exports, but the trade imbalance is crippling Moscow. Russia can only sell its raw materials, oil, gas, and coal, cheaply, while importing machinery, electronics, and cars from China at exorbitant prices. And at what price? Beijing is holding the balance. Russian crude is now sold to China at a $25 to $30 per barrel discount to Brent. The Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, once a symbol of strength, is now a symbol of dependence. Russian energy is sold at China's mercy. Behind closed doors, Beijing sees Russia not as an equal partner, but as a weakened satellite. And for Putin, that is the ultimate humiliation. What is happening now is not a temporary downturn. It is structural decay. Russia's most valuable asset is not oil or gas. It is its people, and they are leaving. Since 2022, more than 1.5 million highly skilled professionals have fled the country: engineers, doctors, IT workers, scientists. It is the largest brain drain in Russia's modern history. Universities are starved of funds. Private tech startups are dying. Foreign companies that once provided jobs and expertise have closed or moved abroad. The Kremlin's obsession with war and control has stifled innovation.
And without innovation, there can be no recovery. The Russian economy isn't just collapsing, it's aging, shrinking, and hollowing out from within. And no amount of propaganda can hide that fact. What we are witnessing is not just the collapse of an economy, it is the collapse of an illusion. Overnight, $160 billion vanished from Moscow's markets. But what has really evaporated is confidence in Putin, in stability, in Russia's future. The workforce is shrinking by millions, inflation is soaring, allies are retreating, and the empire built on oil and fear is running out of both. Putin built his entire power on a simple promise, that he could protect Russia from chaos. But now that chaos is no longer coming from outside, but from within. What is happening marks the end of the myth of an invulnerable Russian economy. And for the Kremlin, perhaps the scariest thing is what even state television can no longer hide. Russia is so exhausted that it can no longer afford to pay for the war that Putin started. On the war map, military and even economic, the line between offense and defense is blurring. Russia's moves are still largely unknown, while Ukraine, exhausted as it is, seems to be preparing for something bigger than the world has ever seen. Sources from the front suggest that a brutal winter may be coming. No one knows exactly who is controlling the battle, only that all sides are calculating in silence. Behind the diplomatic statements are secret moves, plans never made public. And with each passing day, the world moves closer to a new dangerous threshold. Is this just the lull before the storm, or the beginning of an escalation not seen since World War II? The answer, perhaps, will soon be revealed. We will continue to monitor and update the latest developments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because sometimes just one piece of news you missed today can be the turning point of the whole battle tomorrow.